I am Vector, and with me, you know him, you love him, Heath Thug, Paul. He is the greatest comic book YouTuber of all time. You can catch him on the Comic Binge. I'll leave him in the show notes down below. You can always check out. He's doing great stuff in the world of Marvel, Star Wars, everything comic books. And Paul, I don't know if I've told you this, but out of every person I know personally, you are the best ambassador for comic books that I know. You have like a catchphrase, read more comics, that you leave on all of your socials. And that's kind of like my mantra too. I haven't really said it out loud, but
Sure.
you are who I strive to be. I want to be like the person who gets more comics in people's hands. So
Trying to. Yeah.
first of all, thank you for that. But also thank you for joining me today. How are you doing,
Yeah.
sir?
Man, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back, man. Back, I always appreciate, I love you kind of have two new things now with the Star Wars show and the comic cooks and stuff like that. Like, I think it's rad. It's hard. You're a father like me, and both, I think they're similar ages too. So it's like, it is extra hard to carve out time and dedicate these things. And I know it's like you try with your work life, family life, all that stuff. It's so hard to squeeze those things into it as I do the same thing. And it's awesome. You're consistent, and I love that. And you're such a good natured dude, and I mean that. I've been very fortunate about when I've entered the comics YouTube space or whatever, full time or whatever. I've encountered a lot of amazing people, and you're definitely one of them.
Thank you very much.
Alex from Comic Book Historians, Angshaman from For Love of Comics, who I've just did a show with. He's fantastic.
Yeah, he's great.
Just other people too I've met through. It's so great, and obviously Spidey dude, Zach and stuff like that. It's like, so all these people I've met because of I'm doing this on a more regular basis, and it's amazing. So yeah, I appreciate the fact you do it, despite I know how busy you are. It's awesome, and I appreciate your work as well, my friend.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And we were kind of going back and forth of what do we want to talk about? Because we knew we wanted to collaborate again. We've done episodes in the past, but I said, okay, Star Wars. Let's talk Star Wars, and specifically Star Wars comic books. Because you and I could probably go all day talking about movies, TV shows, whatever it is. But I asked you specifically if you could pick out a Star Wars comic, and the one that you chose was Tales of the Jedi from 1993. And I was not familiar with this comic. And I said, this is perfect. This is what I want to talk about with Paul, because I know this is going to be a good time. And I want to get your kind of headspace. Those are fantastic covers.
Oh, I know.
Around when this was coming out, Legends, it was kind of that dark period. We didn't know we were getting anything else. We didn't know if we were just getting the original trilogy or not.
Yeah.
And this was before the High Republic, even though this time period where this is set is kind of now considered the High Republic.
No, this is towards Knights of the Old Republic, if you want to go.
Man, I love that game.
Word, right? I love Knights too. So if you want me to get into it, I'll stop. I'll just correct. I won't correct.
Go.
You want me to go? Okay.
More,
I don't want to.
More.
Okay. I know. I don't want to. Again, you know me. People who know me know I can't shut the hell up. So I apologize. So yeah, Tales of the Jedi, as far as in the canon universe or of Legends, you could say, this takes place, I think, before even Knights of the Republic. So Knights, it comes so in real time, this was before Knights of the Republic, but the time frame I believe is before Knights, because I think in Knights of the Republic they mention Exar Kun, who is from Tales of the Jedi, and everything. So yeah, so in the canon story, this is way before the High Republic. But in real life, this was the first independent Jedi stories we got from after the original trilogy. So this was George wasn't like, go west, my sons and daughters, and said this is what you're gonna write. No, George's like, I don't give an F, I'm doing my own thing, blah blah blah. Right. Do whatever you want. And we'll talk more about the EU in a moment. But so this is the first official Star Wars comics that featured Jedis that weren't Luke Skywalker or Luke Skywalker adjacent, if you want to go even deeper with the Marvel years, where you had that, what's her name? Shira Bay, whatever her name was. That's a whole other story.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, right. But besides a couple randos from that like weird time period, which is that's a bonkers period. These are your first real Jedi that you got, and then after this, there's a lot we could talk about. But this first miniseries, it's just called Tales of the Jedi, issues 1 through 5. I think
5. Yep.
it's 5. Okay, I,
Yes.
I always don't know if it's 5 or 6. You know, it all gets lost in my
Right.
small brain. But this was the first, and it was very exciting. I remember it coming out, and I didn't buy it all of it at once. Because I was a kid, like I was like I was like in
Right.
middle school, so I was buying so many comics. I mean, I grabbed the first issue, read the crap out of it, and then like I buy something else for a while, and I go, oh, I need to read this again. And then I bought the third issue, which was already moved on to a different story, and we'll get into that in a second. But over the years, I eventually would buy the trades or read it, and I always loved the characters a lot, and the world design I thought was pretty, to be honest, pretty good for considering of the time when it came
Right.
out. There's not a lot of maybe it was almost a good thing, you could say, that there wasn't a lot of preconceived notions of what we were doing,
Right.
because we didn't have the prequels, and maybe there was a
Yep.
little more freedom there, maybe. But anyway, but yeah, this came out, and it was very exciting. I remember being very excited about it, and I love the designs and the characters. I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit here
Yes.
too. But yeah, this was reading this at the time was really special as a Star Wars fan, because this came out right after Dark Empire. And Dark
Ah,
Empire,
yes.
yeah. So Dark Empire came out, and this is written by the same writer, Tom Veith. I'm
Yeah.
terrible pronouncing names.
Yeah.
So he wrote Dark Empire. He actually, if you read like the appendix of the Dark Empire comics, the holocrons, they are kind of not set up, but like kind of a lot of that stuff is based in here, like Vema, the Jedi that they find on Nal Hutta. She's like, her grandma's in this. Not her,
Oh,
but like her grandmother that she talks
right.
about. Like, her grandma's in this as a baby. It's so it's like it's cool stuff like that. Like, I think
Yes.
it's something like that. I don't. Yeah, you get what I'm saying. She's
Yeah.
connected, but he sets up a lot of that stuff in here, and he talks about Eula Cordorma, or whatever his name is. Again, terrible pronouncing names. Forgive me. But Ulick's name is mentioned in the appendix, I believe, in Dark Empire, and then it's all been put into this. And anyway, but yeah, so this is like the start, and there's a lot more to this. We can talk about if you want, but this first 5 issues were really important in my opinion, because it really set up the fact that, like, here's Jedi, and here's where Star Wars can go outside of the main Star Wars or Skywalker saga, if you will.
Right. Yeah. And that's a place that I've loved exploring, um, as I've been kind of going through the Disney stuff and the current timeline and canon stuff outside the Skywalker saga is intriguing me more, because I feel like, okay, we had the original trilogy, we had the prequels about Anakin. Let's move on. Let's talk about some other people in the galaxy. It feels like it makes the galaxy so small when you're like, oh, everything is related to the Skywalkers.
Yeah,
So I could imagine myself in 1993 loving this comic, and just from a standpoint of, I didn't think I was going to get any more Star Wars. This would be my
sure.
only outlet.
Yeah.
And I really liked how the structure of the issues was, there was 2 issues,
Yep. Hmm.
2 issues, and then like the third, or the final issue kind of wrapped everything up.
Yeah.
And all of the characters were great. All of
Hmm.
the stories were interesting.
Hmm.
I have this thing that I don't, you might not have this, I don't even know what to call it, but like glasses where when I see artwork that is not digitally colored, it's very difficult for me to get
Interesting.
into it, get engaged in it. And I feel
Interesting.
like it's similar to like a video game. If I was playing the game in 1993 and I was like,
Okay.
"Oh, this game is great." I look at it today, I can put myself back in that mindset,
Hmm.
versus if I never played that game in 93 and I'm playing it for the first time in 2024, I'm like, "Ooh, these graphics are terrible." So
Yeah.
that's it's the same thing. It's not just this art. It's like
No, I got you.
any artwork that is not digitally colored,
Yeah.
it just kind of, it pushes me away a little bit. It doesn't pull me
Hmm.
in, but
Hmm.
the storytelling is what pulled me in. So I just had to get that out of the way. Anytime I have that, I was like, "Oh, no, it's not. This is before digital coloring."
That's fascinating because I as someone like myself, I prefer non like when like for instance when this is a little side tangent real quick, you know me and tangents.
Yeah,
Um
yeah.
for coloring, I I personally love when the colors are as close to the original colors as possible and not digitally enhanced at all.
Mm,
I know that sometimes you got to do that, but like when like I hate to admit this, but but kids and ladies and gentlemen, bear with me when I have to look up comics illegally, you could say, that are not paid for, that I cannot obtain anywhere else. When people scan them in online, I'll just say, you know, from what I speak, probably. But anyway, when I look at those original scans, I just love the color. I love how like crappy it looks. I know that sounds stupid, but there's a charm to it that I like. And listen, and it kind of stems back from my music days a little bit too,
mm,
because I, as a musician and growing up playing music, you kind of see the evolution of recording, especially when I was playing music in the mid late '90s to like you know early 2000s into like the you know whatever when I stopped playing it you know in rock bands. But like you saw like from analog to digital, and from analog there is a distinct sound to from you know whatever, right? And just like with
right,
film,
right.
right? When you know people say
Mhm.
that's all these film snobs are like, really like film when they film on film stock, not on digital cameras. Like, okay, I get it, right? There's a pro and a con to both, and I think that like there are some times you need to have that digital color, but like when I look at the original colors, of this it just feels more alive to me. It feels more
Mm,
like an actual like for again my opinion, just feels more real than like than a lot of digital coloring does. But then again, I read a Moon Knight comic today that looked it was obviously digitally colored and it looked fantastic. So I mean, like it just depends. So what I would
mm,
say to you, Vac man, is like just open up that palette. Just try to be like, you know what? Like you said, not even have to live in the moment from them, but like understand like this is there's something unique about this that digital would be hard to replicate now, but
right.
within
And
reason. Yeah.
you know what's funny is that was me in in '93. I was looking at the '60s comics and being like, "Oh, I
Yeah.
can't." And I was like, "These '90s comics are
Yeah.
great, those '60s comics." And now it's like, I can't look at the '90s
Fair
comics the
enough.
same way.
Fair
But
enough. Fair
yeah,
enough.
you know, that's actually an interesting point about the music. I feel like there's also something similar with hand-drawn animation
Yep.
versus computer generated.
Yeah.
I love that the hand-drawn, it feels like a human is putting their
There's
soul into it.
imperfections there.
Yes, right.
And but the imperfections kind of bring out the art though too because it's not so like perfect, right?
Right,
So, but
right.
yeah, I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so oh, yeah, that was my whole point was I just feel like there is something to be treasured about the human experience, and like you said, analog versus digital, and I'm always going back and forth in my mind because I've always been like a futurist in my mind. I'm always like,
Right.
when I was growing up, Back to the Future 2 is the best one because they went to the future and they showed 'em the
I'm
Jetsons
with
is better
you.
than the
I'm with
Flintstones.
you. I'm with
So,
you.
I've always been like, "Give me the tech, give me the
Forward, yeah, give me
digital and
forward
stuff like
thinking.
that."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I'm also on the human imperfection side, I'm like, I wanna keep the soul, the heart and soul of stuff. So, both of those, there's pros and cons to each
Yeah,
side of
absolutely.
it.
Absolutely. I agree
Um,
100%.
but I
100%.
really liked putting myself in this timeline of pre-Disney,
Mhm. Yeah.
prequels, and I don't know if you got the same type of, hate that I got on my Acolyte coverage that I did on
Everyone
my,
hates me, so I'm just used to it.
it was confusing to me, like, instead of going after the show, they're going after Disney, Kathleen Kennedy,
Yeah.
politics, and woke, and all these things, and it's like, can we just talk about the
Story.
story? If you
Story. Yeah.
liked it or you didn't like it. I don't
Yeah.
care about all that other stuff,
Yeah.
and people pre-hating things, prejudging things before
Mhm.
they even come out, and this felt like a simpler time. I was just putting myself back in these
Yes.
shoes and saying, "Man, I kinda miss that about Legends when people didn't have as many preconceived notions of, this
Yeah.
is what Star Wars should be. This is Disney is not my Star Wars. This is my Star Wars." And I've kinda come to the point where I'm like, I think everything is Star Wars. Like, what you like is what you like. What you don't
Yeah.
like, you don't have to watch that or you don't have to read it again.
Right.
But don't yuck other people's yums and say, "Oh, you're an idiot because you like that." And I'm like,
Or
I'm
you're an
getting
idiot
these
because you
stuff.
don't like it, right? I
Right,
mean, like,
right.
it
Same.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
and listen, and, like, I'm one of the people, just for the record, and I don't mean to cut you off either, I apologize,
Oh, no, no worries.
but, like, first, and just for the record, before we go, okay, for the record, I just wanna say, before we get into the EU stuff about back in the day, I I'm one of the people, I feel like I'm more in the middle, and I feel I'm always in the middle, it feels like, and I know, it's a very safe place to be these days, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not just doing that to save my own skin,
Right.
but it's just how I am. I naturally how I am. Like, because I look at the Acolyte, it's a great example of that. My overall grade of the season, I'm right around a B minus, because
That's same.
because the problem is this: if you listen to the Saga continues with this, my Star Wars show I do, I was ragging on the first couple episodes. Like, it looked cheap a lot of times. Like when, like, what's his name's beard? Like when they go back when he's doing
Yeah.
the, which I love the
Torben. Yeah.
reference, comic reference. I love Charles Soule's Darth Vader run.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes.
But
Perfect.
like, what's his name? I always forget. Tobin.
Torben.
His name is Toman in Game of Thrones, and
Right.
I was like, don't do this to me. It's too confusing. I'm not smart enough to handle this. Okay, I'm sorry. But no, like when he's like he's doing his whole like thing, I'm like, how could this get past? This looks terrible. Like, it looks so bad. But anyway,
Is especially when they told us the budget. It's like, where did the money go? Like,
but okay. So, but that being
yes.
said,
Yes.
it's riddled with stuff like that. We're like, oh my god, this looks terrible. So
Right.
like, it looks amazing, and it would be like, so like, to be like a couple episodes, I'm like, eh, and then other times I'm like, oh hell yeah, and then other times I'm like, I'm like, oh hell yeah. So like, when it hits, and when it
Right.
doesn't, it's like, it's just frustrating.
Yeah.
And that's why
Yeah.
I kind of go between B minus, because sometimes I'm like, I'm being too harsh, and sometimes I'm like, I need to be a realist and be like, not be called a shill. So I need to go B minus. I think B minus is where I'm like, I'm firmly at this point. I could go to B if like, because I'm definitely more forgiving than most people, I'd say. But I just want to get that out the way. I don't think it's perfect. I don't think it's dog crap either, which I think is
Right.
is
That
crazy. I can't watch.
that's yeah.
Yeah, wait, I
The
mean, yeah,
extreme sides of it, either it's the greatest show of all time or it's the worst show of all time. And I'm like, no, there's a middle ground we can have here.
yeah,
It doesn't have to be that extreme. I'm right there with you. I think I would say B. I just
yeah.
I want to know more of the story. I want
Yes, me
it to
too.
continue. And I'm having this a lot lately with at the end of Ahsoka. I was like,
Mm,
okay, if this is the end, I'm going to be upset. But
I
we
agree.
know there's another season coming.
Yeah, right, right.
Acolyte right now, we don't know if there's another season coming, and that gives me anxiety,
Me too.
frustration. I'm like, if they don't continue this is gonna be a disappointment. If they do, then I can continue.
Yeah,
Actually, just
yeah.
had this with Cape Crusader, which just came out a couple days ago,
Mhm.
and it was like Amazon dropped all 10 episodes, and I'm like, okay, they have been renewed for a second season, so I
Yeah,
know the story's gonna continue. I don't have to judge it off of 10 episodes,
right.
and what did they say in those 10 episodes? So, I wish we would just know ahead of time, like, "Hey,
Yeah,
this is getting 3 seasons," or this like, My Adventures with Superman, another great one where it's like, we knew as each season was coming out, "Okay, it's renewed for another one, it's renewed for another one." We didn't have to wait to the end of the season to find out.
yeah.
So what was the other one? Oh, Obi-Wan was also another one. It was like, is this gonna continue? Because there was like rumors about, well,
Yeah,
Qui-Gon
that one was
might.
a little different because they kind of promoted that as like a limited series kind of a
I thought it was
thing.
gonna be a movie at first, and
Well,
then
that
when they
we all, and
said,
that's what originally was going to be, and then that's again different podcast. As I love to say, it's right. But like, I would say that I'm with you. One thing I think that the problem is, and this is with any kind, again, this is like a greater conversation about art in general and corporate
yes,
art,
yes,
like,
yes,
because the problem is, like, again, going back to music and other things like that, and comics is a great example of that too. Going back to the comics, is these music and back in the day and comics back in the day were able to evolve and develop and not be like, oh, you're not making millions of dollars, done, bye.
right,
Like
yep,
you need things to develop and
yes,
evolve over time, because I mean, there's tons of shows that kind of like just kind of in the like kind of wavering at first season, and then it kind of figures itself out, and then it becomes a giant hit. I mean, I can't
Right.
think of things off the top of my head, but I'm not a
I
big
think
TV watcher.
Seinfeld was like that when
Yeah,
that
great. There
that
you go.
first episode or first couple first season of Seinfeld, I was like, but it becomes better and better, and then by the ninth season, it's like one of the greatest comedies of all time.
Right. So
So yeah.
yeah. So to allow, so just about this is going to wrap up on the Acolyte. It'd be I think it's a shame for not just how it ends, but like also just like let it develop because it's
Yes.
like you've kind of it wasn't like a slam dunk. You know, I'm gonna use a basketball term of Sean Kemp if you guys know me.
The
Yeah.
Rain Man.
Hey, listen, Seattle, we need our team back, but that's a whole different podcast. But no, it's not a Rain Man slam dunk from GP down, downtown. Like right, like this is it was more of a kind of it was a jump shot that kind of jumped around and went around and this and then maybe got tipped in by the so it but the thing is that shouldn't be but the good news is that there's so much goodwill I think still there because
Yes.
of like where you're at in the season
Yes.
and obviously the characters the things that they set up in the last episode. I think there's plenty of story there that people get excited and you could develop and make it really interesting and go that route. So anyway, I want to throw that out the door real quick. So Acolyte, not a complete dog crap, but it's not perfect by any means. But back to like your question about EU, and again, sorry for rambling here.
More.
Okay, I will. Thank you. The EU back in the day, one thing that people, at least for me, and I wasn't like this giant super EU guy where all I did was consume all EU. When it first came out, I definitely was on top of it as far I was trying to read as much. And this is kind of goes back to comics. I still to this day I don't like reading prose. I'm not a prose guy. I can avoid. I mean, my wife loves to read, and I was like, I said I hate reading prose. She goes, that's the most unattractive thing you've ever said in your life. Like, I was like, fair. But like, that's why I love reading comics because comics were my way to like, to consume stories. Like I always talk about, when I talk about like my time in Star Wars is when Heir to the Empire came out, I tried reading that book. And as a fifth grader or however old I was when I'm in fifth grade around that time frame, I could not read that book. My ADD, whatever.
Yep.
Dark Empire comes out, that's my jam because it's a comic book, right?
Yes,
so I'm like, oh my God, this is my episode 7. So this was my EU, was reading these comics, like all the early Dark Horse comics from my EU. But I bring all that up because even back in the day as a Star Wars fan, as a young Star Wars fan, I could kind of tell people were excited to have Star Wars and they were just excited to have it. And the other thing that I realized too is before Phantom Menace came out, that it wasn't like popular, right? Like, so it was such a niche thing. So the fact that people even were interested in Star Wars was enough for them to be like, oh, we good. Like you may hate Crystal Star, it may be complete dog crap, but we good because you read it. Like that's the thing. So there was a unification of just like, okay, you may not like everything, but we cool because you still are interested in it. So I think there was a lot of that before we had the Phantom Menace. And then by the time the Phantom Menace came out, there was so much material. Because for me as a fan, again, as I'm getting older, my interests are kind of wavering as far as like, you're getting older and you're kind of developing and things like that. Like, and again, the biggest reason why I say I'm getting older is because I have no money. And so I can't buy comics all the time. I can't buy the books or the toys or, whatever. And so as I got older and by the time the Phantom Menace comes out and I'm like, and even like the special editions, right? The special editions come out. It rekindles my love of Star Wars. I'm starting buying more comics and things like that. All of a sudden, Phantom Menace comes out. I'm like, there's just too much. I can't get back into it. Right. So there was like, well, where do I start? And it was like, well, isn't it all connected? And then like I find out later, oh, it's not all connected. So it was hard to. And so again, going back to like, I go back to my whole thing before Phantom Menace, and then I want to lead into that is that just if you were interested in Star Wars, there was a unification. But then when the Phantom Menace came in, that blew everything up because then all this stuff we all love in these comic books, George just kind of threw out the window.
Right.
Right. Like he, and you talked about your preconceived notions that like this book didn't have. All of a sudden, now George has started that with the Phantom Menace.
Right. Yeah.
So, just kind of wrapping that point up. The reason why I bring that up is that was the start. I mean, I think it's obvious. That's the start of the fracture of, like this is not what we want,
right,
or what we expected. We expected the Jedi to be like in this when you have Master Akura, I think his name is, who's got like what 4 or 5 different Jedi underneath him, and then like goes to Jedi Master Thrawn and like Master Thrawn, but like you know what I'm saying? Like it's like for instance, spoiler alert, there's a part where one of the Jedis has to like gets visited by a Force ghost and is like told to like go get your training. Sound familiar?
Yes.
But like this is all before the Phantom Menace and the Clone Wars. So they thought, oh, everyone's a Force ghost.
Right.
And so again, there's like this fun, like so when I say all that stuff we thought about before the prequels, George was like, see you later. Doesn't matter.
Yes.
And again, it's a whole different podcast, but I think that was the start of the fracture that kind of, again, that's a whole other podcast too, but it started the fracture of like fans having their expectations ripped away and then feeling they have to protect their stories. Like, no, this is where it needs to be. This is the only way it can be. If it's not like this, then F you and blah, 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 blah. So I think that was the start of it right there.
Yeah. And that I 100% agree with you. And it's so funny to live in 2024 now and be experiencing this stuff when we were there in 99, when the same people were backlashing against the prequels. Now people are like, oh, the prequels are way better than the sequels. I can't wait for the next one to come out and people be like, oh, the sequels are way better than whatever the next one is.
Right.
It is that like it's almost like you don't know what you want until you have it. Like, I really don't understand how people are not able to section off. Like maybe that's why I like multiverse stories so much, is because I can read different Earths and different realities, and it doesn't make me say, well, because Superman is black on this Earth, and that he can't be white on this Earth. And it's like, they're just stories. Like, why does it matter? It's the same thing with Star Wars.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And I think that like that's, and again, I think it's where I think the Tales of the Jedi is really unique in that you can read it and there is like this kind of this whole mythic idea that we all thought the Jedi were.
Yes.
And I think that's where I think that the Tales of the Jedi gets a lot right, is that it's that this again, I don't want to bash The Last Jedi or things like that, so just bear with me. But one thing that I've always said to people, and it's hard because again, in any art form, sometimes the obvious thing is the best thing. And and whether, because sometimes we want to divert because we don't want to be predictable, or divert because it's too obvious, and it's like, or whatever, and it's like, what we want to do something different. But I think this is a good example of why it might be. We all thought like, like this is what we thought. What was all assumed in like Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, that we in New Hope, that we learned of the Jedi. This is the mass. Everyone, you would ask a million people in 1990, they would assume this would be like, not this story, but what they do in here is what we expect, because that's what's in the movies. They didn't divert anything from that. So it's just really fascinating to me that this is a good example, I think, of you got to kind of stay within your confines sometimes, and you have to, it's hard because there is a balance, but you have to know, like, again, I do think that sometimes the obvious thing is the best answer. And I look at Tales of the Jedi as like, at least these first 5 issues. After that, different story. But these first 5 issues are so pure, fully of like love of Star Wars and like what we thought the Jedi were, that they still work even out of context, especially when you
Yes.
have the brilliant Star Wars Visions stories that we're getting that are obviously not in canon.
Right.
You know, like the Ninth Jedi, I think is just brilliant Star Wars storytelling. Is it canon? Obviously not, right? But it's similar to like this. I would say if you like Ninth Jedi or you like the Vision stuff, this is 1000% up your alley. This is a
Yes.
fantastic book. Um, like there's I'm gonna try not to spoil it because I you know if you guys watch this comic binge or if you're about to watch the comic binge, one thing about me, I don't want to spoil. I mean within reason, I try not to spoil because I want people to read this and be surprised. But there is kind of like a cool, kind of like again I always forget is it what's his name from the Acolyte, the bad guy, the
Oh, Chimere.
I want to call him Quagmire. I always want to call him Quagmire, but it's not him. It's Quagmire. Again, I love the Stranger Quagmire. He's my favorite character in the show. He's fantastic. Like give him season 2. Be like it's about him. Like we'd be good. We'd be good. Anyway, I digress. But kind of like Yoda and I just forgot his name again. You know what I'm talking about. And Quagmire. Thank you, Vision. Thank you, God. There's a similar idea of like the unexpected master, I'll just say.
Right,
If you know
right.
if you
Yep.
know what I'm talking about.
Right.
And it's pretty cool, I think. Like I think it's pretty rad. I'm like, okay, this is pretty cool. Like so yeah, definitely. In fact, I would say one of the cooler reveals in Star Wars, in my opinion. Like I remember as a kid, that issue is if you guys are wondering what the issue is, it's issue number 3. And Nomi's Sunrider is one of my favorite Jedis ever. She's fantastic, a fantastic character, especially where you see her arc goes later on into in the series. Which again, I'll talk about before we wrap up. We definitely got to talk about the other stuff after that, the other Tales of Jedi comics, really quick, just for a second. But her story is one of the better aspects of that going forward. But her introduction, I think, is phenomenal. I think that issue 3 alone is one of my favorite Star Wars stories of all time. Like I've read that over like it feels like a million times. It's so good.
Yeah.
And the
And
art,
that was
yeah,
that was the one where it switched up because the first 2 were the first arc, and then the second one, the 3rd issue is where it switched up. That was a great reveal, and I kind of wish I had I had gotten to experience the Yoda and the Darth Vader reveal when I was younger because both
yeah,
at the time that you and I were watching
similar,
Star Wars,
yeah,
it was pop culture. Like everybody knew, oh, I am your father. Like everybody quoted it. Everybody knew Yoda, so it wasn't a surprise to me. But every time I watch it, I always put myself in the mindset of what if I didn't know that, and I get enjoyment out of that every time. So this one I actually did not know. So when I was reading it, I was like, yeah. So I had the same
it's really
reaction.
unique too, right? Like
Yes.
it was a very inspired idea. And to be honest, I would say Tom Vaith again, terrible names. He I would say his writing, at least as how he presents Star Wars, is very similar to Filoni. Because I
Yeah.
feel like there's a lot of it's not George Lucas rehashed. And I think anyone who knows Star Wars as well as and knows Filoni and knows his mentorship under George, he's not a George clone. But you see where the important things that George had, he holds in high regard. Tom has the same, I think, has the same thing and knows where to push and knows where to pull. And you see that here, especially in these 5 issues alone. Like, I think it reminds me a lot of that Filoni of like, I know had the mythical
Mhm.
fantasy element take
Yeah.
over, and it stays fantasy the entire time.
Mm.
Even though Dark Empire, you could argue, goes hard sci-fi.
Right, right, right.
But that works for that story. And that's where I
Yes.
think Tom knew, like, I can pull from that fantasy. I can pull hard from that, that science fiction. And in this, it's mainly fantasy. And I love that. I love the fantasy elements of Star Wars. It's my favorite parts of Star Wars, the Force and things like that. So,
Yes.
yeah. So if you love Jedi at all, these 5 issues I think are a must. First of all, they are contained, I think, in this volume, which the stuff that comes before it, we'll talk about real quick. But it's in this epic volume. It's on digital. go read. You owe it to yourself to read those first 5 issues. Tales of Jedi Volume 1. Go whatever it is. This cover I think goes hard. I think this
Yeah.
cover is like one of the best Star Wars covers of all time. But anyway, yeah, I love the miniseries.
Yeah, that was a great recommendation, so I'm glad that you brought it to my attention. I had, like, a gap where I wasn't, consuming as much Star Wars as I do now, so I always like it when I'm able to get into those gaps and see, "Oh, what was I missing out
Yeah,
on at the time?" So, yeah, can you expand upon
yeah.
what else happened in Tales of the Jedi? What was, your thoughts overall?
Well, so here's what I'm gonna say. There's,
No
it's really cool.
spoilers.
Yeah, I'm not gonna use spoilers. You know me, I'm not gonna use spoilers. But what I'm gonna say is, there's what I would, in my opinion, there's something called the Golden Age of the Sith that takes
Mm,
place. If you buy this trade, it's kind of expensive. It's a thick trade, so you're this has mainly Golden Age of the Sith stuff until like the very end where they do the last like I think the mini series and like last 5 issues of this comic, but of this miniseries, which is fantastic. Golden Age of the Sith, in my opinion, is pretty bad. It's pretty bad. Like it's not good. Like so, if you buy this, just know it's worth paying it just for the cover and the comics to the back. The first part, it's not so good in my opinion. It's yeah. Anyway, it's not great, but it sets up a lot what comes after it comes after this and where you get then the Rise of the Sith comics or what was it? Rise of the
mm,
Sith, I don't know what it's called, but or Sith War or whatever it is.
yeah.
But anyway, it introduces a new character that's very EU centric with Exar Kun, who's part of the Jedi Academy trilogy. Um, Kevin J. Anderson and Tom Vaith became friends because they were working in the same time frame. And so Kevin J. Anderson had to like work with him a little bit. And at
Mm,
first he was like, I don't like this Tom guy. He's in my world. And then like they got to know each other. And then like they became like really good friends. And they actually co-wrote the Sith comics that came afterwards together.
oh,
So and they actually co-wrote the Golden Age of the Sith as well. Like so like Kevin J. Anderson actually ended up being like a pivotal like writer in that going forward. But Tom
mm,
wrote the first 5 issues of that series we read. And but the Sith, the whole like great Sith war, I forgot what it's called. But like whatever happens after this miniseries, it's it's hit and miss. It's not 100% great. I think the art, to be honest, is the main reason. It's very inconsistent.
mm,
It's not the greatest art all the time, and the covers are phenomenal art. And to be honest, and this is not I hate being I don't want to be judgmental, but one of the reasons why is because Dark Horse was a smaller company. It still is.
you're
Well,
right,
it's actually owned by a
right.
bigger company now, but back in the day,
Yeah,
it's an independent comic book series, and that's
right.
why George kind of wanted it. Essentially, I mean,
Mm,
Marvel kind of was like him and I was like, actually, I'm going to take it to Dark Horse instead, like do its own thing. And when we had this coming out, let's be real, Dark Horse isn't going to be paying the same rates as Marvel and DC or even Image at that point,
right,
right? So I
right,
mean, like they're not going to be getting the best talent to do the
right,
interiors,
right.
And again, like art is subjective, but I think the art is just not as strong as it is in the early days of this stuff. Like there's it sucks because the miniseries that takes place after Tales of the Jedi, the art is fantastic, but then like the artist like leaves or is gone, she's gone, and then like the art kind of goes meh, and it just kind of ruins the flow of the story a little bit.
Oh,
So
wow.
but if you just again, the art's not terrible. It's just not great. It's just not like it's
Right.
like whatever. But there's so much great storytelling in there that like of like lore of like all the stuff of the EU. It's all pretty much laid out there. Exar Kun's origin and his rise and fall, and another Jedi's rise and fall to say is revealed throughout this. It's really cool, and you get like if you check out the episode we did with Angshuman recently, our favorite action scenes in comics, and just like off the top of my head, I picked one from the Star Wars that series, the Sith or the Sith War. I can't remember the name is. But there's a part where Exar Kun fights his Jedi Master, and it's a sparring. It's not like he's like turning evil at that time.
Mhm, mhm.
At that time, Again, that's not a major spoiler in my opinion, but he takes his 2 lightsabers and he fights his Jedi Master, like as a spar, because he's like, it's pretty cool. Yeah, I'll just leave it there. It's pretty cool. I show
Nice.
if you so just leave it there because like he, okay, I'll just say it. This go read it because it's pretty rad. He fights his Jedi Master who only uses a stick to defend himself. So like so Exar Khan's got 2 lightsabers and he's just going to town on his Jedi. Again, they're not like they're not like going evil, but it's just like they're sparring. And in the context of the story, you'll understand why. It's written pretty well. It's pretty cool. And like Exar Khan takes 2 lightsabers and starts going at with his Jedi Master, and he only has a stick. So that wouldn't fly in today's Star Wars, but that's still pretty freaking awesome, dude. Like that's rad. So I mean, anyway, there's great moments there. And to wrap it up, the idea of Darth Maul's double-bladed lightsaber comes from Tales of the Jedi.
Oh man,
There's a
I love when they get inspired and take bits and pieces from different things and
yeah
combine them. That sounds right up my alley because I remember that there's that scene in Tales of the Empire that came out where it was like just dodging, no like no all defense, no offense, and the
yeah
person was just getting frustrated. And like I love those type of scenes when you can see somebody who's like a master at their craft and
yeah.
they're just doing it with ease, and the other person's like trying to do it as hard as
No,
they can.
you'll
So
love that comic then, man. You'll love it.
yes,
It's
yeah,
cool. It's
okay,
super good. It's
perfect.
rad. It's rad.
Man, Paul, you always give me great recommendations, so I love having you on.
Thanks,
You're
man.
welcome anytime
I
to
love it.
come back
I'll
here,
come back
talk
anytime.
Star Wars, talk comic books, everything. And you know what? I did want to say real quick, if we had known each other in 1993, we
I hear
probably
you.
would have been best
Best friends,
friends
man.
because
Yep.
Sean Kemp was my favorite player
Hell
and
yeah,
Gary
dude.
Gary Payton was my
Hell yeah.
second favorite player. I lived
Love
in
those.
Sacramento, California. We had the
Oh,
Kings, and they were
Egg King
terrible at that time. This is
that time,
before
man.
Chris Webber, before any of that stuff, and it was Sean Kemp was my
Yep.
guy. So
Yeah, dude.
we would have been friends,
Yeah, dude.
definitely.
Yeah, dude. I love. Yeah. Sonics. Miss them. Hope they'll be back eventually. So we'll see.
Excellent. Well, why don't you tell everybody what's going on at the Comic Binge this week?
Well, this week, so just really quick. Last week we did our review of Deadpool and Wolverine.
Ooh-wee.
Again, the comic binge only focuses on comics, with the exception of a fun movie review that's about a comic adaptation or comic related, and I call it Comic of the Movies. But pretty much everything else is comic related because I want to promote comics as
Yes,
Zach
yes.
said here earlier. But anyway, so last week was so you'll check that out. That's doing actually again for me. My show is peanuts, but but like for me, it's doing decently well. But this week we are continuing our dive into Grant Morrison's Batman run.
Ooh.
And so I love Grant Morrison. I love Grant Morrison. He's such a phenomenal writer. My best friend Chris, who's one of the main co-hosts, he loves Grant Morrison's Batman writing. He loves it. And he wanted to do a cool thing where he read issue by issue, not just like 6 issues. We're going issue by issue because it's very layered. And Grant is a super talented layered writer. And I'm loving it. And our other main co-host Javi, love him too. He loves to run too. So we're going through issue by issue, and we're doing like a side adventure with it. We're talking about Arkham Asylum, which is basically Grant Morrison's first writing of Batman.
Yes.
And it's like one of that Vertigo kind of late 80s, like in the vein of Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns. Did a lot from the medium at the time of like, oh, like this is Dave McKean, I think his name is, the guy who hates superheroes.
That's I think that's right.
Yeah, he drew and painted the artwork, and it's a very important work. We had to delay it multiple times for different reasons of family and whatnot, but we're finally doing it this week. And that's going to be really exciting because, Batman, everyone loves Batman, and it's not like the proper run. It's a kind of a side tangent because we're about to get into some more the issue where right after we do Arkham Asylum, we're going to be doing the episode where Dave McKean, I think, comes back, does painted work, but it's prose of that story, which again, I'm not looking forward to reading because it's prose, but Chris gets mad at me about it. Anyway, Arkham Asylum will be next week, and then next month also we're gonna be doing a the week after that, we're probably I'm thinking I'm gonna do like some comic like purchase shows, like kind of maybe mini reviews of like comics I've been buying, if they worth it, whatever. A lot,
Mm.
I buy stuff all the time, get in trouble. And then the week after that, we're doing an alien show where we're doing all like for like Aliens
Ooh.
Romulus. We're gonna be doing Alien Romulus. My buddy Adam from the AVP Galaxy. He's gonna come on and give us all Aliens comic recommendations, because that dude, I love Adam. He's awesome. And then last week we'll be doing, if you guys like Transformers, we'll be doing Void Rivals Volume 1. So yeah,
Yes.
so I just read Void Rivals yesterday, and I just started
Oh.
Transformers yesterday as well. So I finished Void Rivals, started Transformers. Thank you, Hoopla. You are the best. Anyway, so yeah, Hoopla, people. Can't read comics and you have an iPad or iPhone, whatever. Go download Hoopla. Free comics, a library system. It's amazing. Anyway, I've talked too much. The Comic Binge YouTube, go to it, please. Subscribe. I love you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Paul. And thank you for joining us. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. But we always love to hear from you, and we would be honored if you would join us.